So next up is Cristina Jimenez. Cristina has a story about growing up in New York City. Thank you for being here, Cristina. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And it's such an honor to be with all these powerful women. My family and I came to this country when I was 13 in 1998. We fled poverty as Ecuador was in the middle of a political and economic crisis. Without jobs, my family struggled to pay for food and for school. Both of my parents dreamed of going to college, but both of them came from working class families and they could not achieve that dream. So when we moved to New York, it was their dream that their children would have not only food and shelter in this country, but also an education. And that was my dream too. I worked hard in school, and in high school, I was getting ready to apply for college. One day, I met with my college advisor. And one of the first questions she asked me was, do you have a social security number or do you have a green card? To which I said, no. Then she asked me, do your parents have a social security number and a green card? To which I responded, again, no. She then said, you cannot go to college because you're undocumented and I cannot help you. She then said, next, calling on to the next student. It was horrifying. I went home crying to share the news with my mom. I dropped my book bag on the floor, threw myself in bed, and just cried. But then my mom said that I needed to go back to school and find someone else who could help me. If not, she will go to school herself and find some help. As a teenager, I was mortified that she will go to school. After 9/11, New York eliminated in-state tuition, which is a policy that allowed undocumented students like me to pay in-state tuition rates. Given that the policy was eliminated, now I was supposed to pay as an international student an astronomical sum of money. One of my ESL teachers helped me to figure out how to apply for the City University of New York. And in that journey, I also found community organizations and labor unions that were advocating for students like me. In awe, I remember reading in the newspapers about undocumented students that were fasting to pressure policymakers in New York and the governor to change this policy. And in 2002, a few weeks before my first semester in college started, New York Governor Pataki signed a new law guaranteeing in-state tuition for all students, regardless of immigration status. I cried of happiness that I will be able to go to college. So I began my first semester in college in 2002. And even though I could pay in-state tuition, I wasn't able to get financial aid because undocumented students could not have access to it. So my mom took on an additional job at a nail salon in addition to cleaning homes. And I sold Avon products and helped her to clean houses over the weekend. At this time, I also got involved in campaigns to stop the deportations of two young immigrants, Kamal from New York and Marie from Missouri. They got caught up in the post 9/11 immigration enforcement regime that specifically target Muslims, immigrants for deportation and detention. So we came together and spoke up, shared their stories in public, spoke to the media about it, pushed members of Congress, and put pressure on ICE and the agency to make sure that they were allowed to stay. After these efforts, Marie and Kamal were able to stay here in the United States, their home. But it was a bittersweet moment because Marie's parents were deported. In 2006, one of my greatest fears became a reality. I was awakened by a call early in the morning from a friend who told me that our friend Walter was in a detention camp and will be deported. I broke down into tears and I felt so overwhelmed by the possibility that I may not see Walter again. Walter was from Guatemala and came to this country with his family when he was 11 years old. Walter was the first undocumented student that I met when I was in college. In awe, I just remember admiring how Walter would courageously share his story about being undocumented in public. And he was the one that helped me figure out how to get a cell phone as an undocumented person and how to navigate finding a job. We became really close friends, and together we started organizing our community and undocumented students in New York. After 9/11, Border Patrol agents gained more power, and they could ask anyone about their immigration status. Walter was on an Amtrak train from New York to Chicago, and Border Patrol agents came into that train and racially profiled all men of color. Walter was arrested, handcuffed, and taken to jail. But after 5 days, we were able to get Walter out. But that was because we took action. Our community came together to put pressure on members of Congress, to work with lawyers and faith leaders and senators and teachers, all putting pressure on ICE to release Walter and allow him to stay. This was a big turning point for my life because I was not only relieved that Walter was able to stay and that he was released from detention, but this experience made me feel deeply in my heart that no one deserved not only to be targeted, but separated from their loved ones, jailed, and deported. I remember talking to Walter about his experience in detention, and that brought us closer together. And it was that experience that led me to commit to community organizing, to organizing immigrant youth and families to ensure that all immigrants, regardless of immigration status, can live freely and without the fear of deportation. Walter and I and other undocumented young people founded United We Dream in 2008. Our organizing and advocacy efforts led to the historic victory of the DACA program, which we campaigned for aggressively by sharing our stories, marching, leading rallies, and leading civil disobedience.
It's 9 o'clock.
Protects over 700,000 young people from deportation, just like my brother Jonathan. But this administration has dismantled the DACA program and has implemented policies that have separated children from their parents, put kids in cages, and deported immigrants en masse. So I'm sure that in my story, you can hear how policies that are voted on and decided on by policymakers and elected officials can have a direct impact on people's lives, which is why I'm so passionate, not only about organizing, but about this election. After more than 20 years in this country, Walter and I became citizens last year and are voting in our first presidential election. And Walter and I not only became committed to building a movement for immigrant justice, we also fell in love and committed to each other in that journey. This November, I'll cast my vote to defend my immigrant parents, my brother Jonathan, who has DACA, and millions of people who have been impacted by deportation, detention, and family separation. Thank you.
Cristina, thank you so much for your story and for sort of vividly helping our listeners understand how our public policy does impact everyday people like yourself and your family. I know you worked incredibly hard on this story. Thank you.